Have you ever witnessed a moment so pure it could melt even the coldest heart? Tonight, under the soft glow of the stage lights, a little girl in a white dress holds a microphone with trembling hands. Her voice, tender and innocent, echoes through the hall as she whispers, "This song is for my sick mommy." What she doesn't know is that this song born from love and hope is about to change her life forever. Before we continue, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here, for choosing to spend these moments with us. May peace, health, and love always find their way to your home. Tell me from which country and at what time are you listening to this story tonight? The auditorium smelled faintly of polished wood and autumn rain. Outside, the streets of Asheville shimmered under the mist, but inside, the lights were warm, golden, and steady. Elias Hartman sat near the back row, a man whose expensive suit couldn't hide the fatigue around his eyes. He hadn't planned to stop here tonight. It was supposed to be just another charity event on his schedule, yet something in the program's title had caught him off guard. Autumn Harmony, Children's Voices for Hope. When the curtain lifted, a dozen children stood in a crooked line, clutching microphones too large for their hands. Their teacher strummed the first notes of a simple tune, and the hall filled with hesitant voices. Most were out of sync, charmingly chaotic. But then, one voice rose above the rest, clear, trembling, heartbreakingly sincere. Elias leaned forward before he realized he was holding his breath. The little girl stood at the far end, no more than 7 or 8, wearing a handmade red dress and a pair of scuffed shoes. She didn't look nervous. She sang as if she were speaking to someone she loved. Her song wasn't perfect, but it carried a tone he hadn't heard in years, fragile yet brave, like a memory refusing to fade. When she reached the chorus, her voice quivered. When hearts forget, love remembers. When the dark comes, the light returns. Elias's hand trembled. Those were his words lyrics he'd written long ago, for a woman who no longer spoke his name. After the applause, the teacher introduced the children one by one. When she reached the girl, she smiled proudly. "And that was Lila Lee," she said. "She wrote this song for her mother." The name struck him harder than any sound in the room. Lila. The air thinned, the light dimmed, and his mind began to race backward to a house by the coast, to laughter echoing across the piano keys, to the night everything fell apart. Elias left before the next performance began. The sound of clapping chased him down the aisle, but he didn't turn back. Outside, the drizzle had turned to steady rain. He stood beneath the theater marquee, staring at the falling water as if the answers were hidden in its rhythm. A child, singing words he wrote, and bearing a name that once belonged to his unborn daughter. He almost laughed a dry, bitter sound swallowed by the rain. "Coincidence," he muttered. "That's all." But deep inside, something shifted. It was as if the song had reached through the years and placed a hand on his chest, reminding him that remorse doesn't fade, it only waits. He walked to his car, parked across the street. The windshield was fogged, and for a moment he sat in silence, listening to the rain tap against the glass. Then he opened the glove compartment, where an old photograph lay between folders and receipts. Vivian's face smiled back at him bright, full of the warmth he'd traded for ambition. Next to her, a hospital bed, empty. A memory of a life he'd failed to save. As the rain slowed, he whispered to no one, "You'd laugh if you saw me now." A millionaire lost in a song sung by a stranger. He turned the key, but instead of driving away, he closed his eyes. The melody still echoed in his head, the same melody that once played while he held Vivian's trembling hand. Somewhere in that small town, a little girl had sung his forgotten promise. And for the first time in years, Elias felt something stir beneath the ashes of regret, a quiet pull, fragile yet undeniable, calling him home. The next morning, Elias woke before dawn. The city outside was still asleep, its skyline muted under a thin veil of fog. He made his coffee the way he always did, black, no sugar, and stood by the window of his penthouse overlooking Dallas. Everything about his life was measured. The marble counters, the silent elevator, the absence of laughter. He had built his empire from discipline, but somewhere along the way, he'd misplaced the sound of joy. The rain from the night before had cleared, leaving streaks of silver on the glass. He took a slow sip and the warmth cut through the morning chill. Yet even the bitter taste of coffee couldn't wash away the melody echoing in his head. That girl's voice, Lila's, had followed him into his dreams. He saw her on stage again, small hands gripping the microphone, her words trembling with something too pure to belong to the world he lived in. By mid-morning, Elias found himself searching online for the event he'd attended. Autumn Harmony, Children's Voices for Hope. There were photos posted on the local community site. His eyes scanned every image until he saw her again, the red dress, the scuffed shoes, the innocent smile. And beside her stood a woman holding her shoulders gently, smiling despite the exhaustion on her face. The caption read, "Vivian Lee and her daughter, Lila." The world seemed to tilt. He pushed back from the desk, his breath caught between disbelief and longing. 8 years of silence, and here she was, alive, a mother, standing under stage lights, with their child. He'd imagined this moment countless times, but reality hit with both joy and guilt. He had wanted to believe Vivian had moved on, had built something better without him. But seeing her now thin, pale, fragile, it was clear she hadn't been spared by life either. A soft knock broke his trance. Margaret, his longtime assistant, peeked in. "You're here early," she said. Her voice was gentle, the kind that came from years of watching him live behind walls. "Another sleepless night?" He smiled faintly. "Something like that." She placed a folder on his desk. "Your flight to Chicago leaves at 9. Should I have the car ready?" Elias didn't answer right away. He was staring at the photo again, his thumb tracing the faint smile on Vivian's lips. "Margaret, do you believe in coincidences?" She tilted her head. "Not really. Why?" He exhaled slowly. "Because last night, I heard a little girl sing a song I wrote 10 years ago, and her name was Lila." Margaret said nothing at first, her eyes softening with concern. "You think she's—" "I don't know what to think." He looked away, out the window where the sunlight began to break through the fog. "But I can't ignore it anymore." Margaret nodded quietly. "Then maybe it's time you stopped running from ghosts, Elias. Maybe it's time to go home." Her words lingered like a gentle push he hadn't realized he needed. He canceled the Chicago flight within the hour. That evening, he packed a small bag, no suits, no briefcases, just a worn leather jacket and the photograph he'd carried for years. The highway stretched before him, long and quiet, lined with trees that had begun to change color. As he drove out of the city, the hum of the tires on the asphalt blended with the memory of that little girl's song. The melody rose and fell like the wind that brushed across the windshield. He didn't know what he would say to Vivian, or whether she'd even open the door. But for the first time in nearly a decade, he was ready to face the life he had broken. Regret had kept him frozen. Love was what finally moved him forward. Hours later, as dusk painted the sky in amber and purple, Elias crossed the old bridge into Asheville. He slowed down when the familiar landmarks appeared, the diner on Main Street, the church bell tower, the maple trees lining the park where they once sat, dreaming of a future that never came. He parked by the curb, turned off the engine, and let the silence sink in. Somewhere out there, a little girl named Lila was probably getting ready for bed, unaware that her song had stirred a man she'd never met, a man who had once loved her mother more than life itself. Elias leaned back in the seat, his eyes fixed on the faint glow of a small house at the end of the road. The porch light flickered softly through the mist, steady, patient, as if it had been waiting for him all this time. By the time Elias reached the edge of town, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets washed clean and glistening beneath the soft glow of street lamps. Asheville had not changed much. The same narrow main street lined with antique shops, the same diner with its neon sign flickering "Home Cookin'" since 1954. But to him, it felt like stepping back into a life he had once known and lost. He parked across from the small community clinic that stood near the park. A handful of cars were scattered in the lot, and through the windows he could see nurses moving quietly inside. He didn't know why his steps led him there, but something about that place, its gentle light, the tired people waiting in chairs, reminded him of Vivian. The way she used to smile through exhaustion, saying, "Hope doesn't pay the bills, but it keeps the lights on." He walked in, the bell above the door chiming softly. A young nurse looked up, surprised to see a man in an expensive coat in a place like this. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked politely. "I'm looking for someone," Elias said, his voice lower than he intended. Vivian Lee. The nurse hesitated, her smile dimming a little. She's here for treatment. I'm sorry, visiting hours ended an hour ago. He nodded slowly, trying to mask the way his stomach tightened. I understand. I used to know her. I didn't realize she was... The nurse's tone softened. She's a kind woman, comes in alone, always asks more questions about other patients than about herself. People like her don't deserve the luck they get. She glanced toward the hallway. If you wait a bit, the night doctor will be making rounds. Maybe he'll let you see her for a minute. Elias sat down on a worn leather bench. The clinic smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee that had been brewed too long. He watched as a janitor mopped the floor in slow, careful circles. The world felt smaller here, stripped of luxury, pretense, and pride. It was the kind of place where every small act of kindness mattered. He realized he had forgotten what that felt like. After a few minutes, footsteps echoed from the hallway. The nurse returned, motioning him to follow. She's in room 12, she whispered. But please, keep it short. The room was dimly lit, a soft lamp casting pale gold across the walls. Vivian lay in bed, her hair cropped short, her features thinner than he remembered, but unmistakably hers. Time had taken some of her glow, but left behind something stronger, quiet, resilience. She was reading aloud from a picture book, her voice hoarse but gentle. A small girl sat at the bedside, legs swinging, listening intently. Elias froze in the doorway. The child's blue eyes caught the light, and he felt the same shock that had struck him in the theater, the resemblance, the song, the truth. Vivian looked up mid-sentence, her eyes widening as if she'd seen a ghost. The silence stretched between them, fragile and electric. The girl turned curiously, then smiled. Mommy, is that the man from the show? The one who clapped the loudest? Vivian's lips parted, but no words came. Elias stepped forward, his voice trembling. You remember me? Lila nodded, her tone bright. Of course. You were crying. Mommy said it's good when grown-ups cry. Sometimes it means their hearts are still working. Vivian's breath caught. Lila, sweetheart, could you go get some water from the cooler outside? I'll be right here. The little girl hopped off the chair and skipped out, leaving the door slightly ajar. The moment it closed, Vivian's fragile composure broke. Elias, she whispered, why are you here? He swallowed hard. Because I heard her sing, and because I can't ignore the truth anymore. Vivian shook her head, tears glistening in her tired eyes. You shouldn't have come. It's been 8 years. There's nothing left to fix. Vivian turned her face away, pretending to adjust the blanket, though her trembling hands betrayed her. You should have stayed in your world, Elias, she said softly. The one with perfect suits and boardrooms and cameras. This isn't yours anymore. He took a cautious step closer, his voice barely above a whisper. It used to be ours, until the day you disappeared. Her laugh was fragile, almost bitter. Disappeared? Is that what you tell yourself? That I just vanished? You never looked hard enough. He winced, the words cutting deeper than she knew. I did look. For years. Every time I thought I saw your face in a crowd, I stopped. Every time I heard your name, I hoped it was you. But it was like chasing smoke. Vivian closed her eyes. There was nothing to find, Elias. Not then. Not after what happened. He reached into his coat and pulled out an old, creased photograph of Vivian, sitting on a stool with her guitar, laughing under the dim lights of a bar called Murphy's. You remember that night. You sang Eternal Hearts. You said it was ours forever. And then, the next morning, you were gone. Her fingers brushed the photo, but she didn't take it. You don't know everything, she said quietly. You don't know what I saw. What I was told. Then tell me, Elias urged, his tone trembling between anger and pleading. Tell me, what could have made you leave without a word? Tell me why you raised our daughter alone. The silence was heavy enough to make the small room feel smaller. Vivian looked at him, really looked, and saw a man worn not by greed, but by regret. The sharp edges of ambition had dulled into something gentler, something human. I was shown things, she said at last. Pictures, recordings, accounts that proved you were lying to me, that you had another woman, that you were using investor money for yourself. I believed it all, Elias, because I wanted to believe the pain had a reason. He stared at her, stunned. That's not true. None of it. Someone wanted us apart. Vivian shook her head. Maybe. Or maybe I just didn't want to be the fool anymore. Her voice broke. But when I found out I was pregnant, it was too late. I couldn't go back. Elias closed the distance between them, his voice trembling. You should have told me. She gave a sad smile. Would you have believed me back then? When you were still chasing a dream that didn't have room for anyone else? Before he could answer, the door creaked open, and Lila stepped in, clutching 2 small paper cups of water. Her innocent smile was a lifeline in the tension. Here you go, Mommy. And one for the man with sad eyes. And Elias knelt to take it, his heart breaking and healing all at once. Thank you, sweetheart, he said, his voice thick. You have your mother's kindness. Lila beamed proudly. Mommy says kindness is the only thing that never runs out, even when money does. Vivian's eyes glistened again, and she turned away. Elias stayed kneeling, the little cup trembling in his hand. He looked at Lila, the curve of her nose, the fleck of gold in her blue eyes, the way she tilted her head when she smiled. He didn't need a test or a paper to tell him the truth. He felt it in his bones. His daughter. He rose slowly, setting the cup down on the tray. Vivian, he said softly, I'm not here to take anything from you. I just want to help. You and her both. Vivian's lips trembled. Help? She repeated, as if the word itself was foreign. You think money fixes 8 years of silence? No, he said quietly. But maybe love can start to. The room fell silent again. Outside, the rain had started up once more, tapping gently against the window pane like a heartbeat. Vivian looked down at her daughter, who had already curled against her side, fighting sleep. Elias took a step back, his voice barely audible. I'll come back tomorrow, if you'll let me. Vivian didn't answer, but as he turned to leave, she whispered so softly he almost missed it. Don't make her wait 8 years, too. Elias paused in the doorway, the words settling into his heart like a vow. He looked back one last time at the woman he'd lost and the child he'd just found, and knew he would never walk away again. The morning after his visit, Elias woke to the faint hum of rain against his hotel window. He had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lila's smile, that unguarded warmth, that simple kindness that made everything he had built feel hollow. He sat at the edge of the bed, running a hand through his hair. The leather jacket from the night before hung over a chair, still damp from the drive. On the desk lay the folded photograph of Vivian, the same one he had carried for years. But now, there was something new inside him. Not nostalgia, but purpose. By 8 o'clock, he was standing in front of the clinic again. The nurse from last night greeted him with a knowing smile. You came back, she said softly. I told her I would, he replied. She hesitated. Vivian's still weak today. She's been pushing herself too hard. If you really want to help, she needs more than flowers or visits. She needs stability, insurance, real care. Elias nodded slowly. Then I'll make sure she gets it. Just don't tell her it's from me. The nurse studied him for a moment, then gave a small, approving nod. You must have loved her once. He smiled faintly. Once hasn't stopped. He spent the rest of the morning on calls, quiet, deliberate calls. A private oncology specialist from Charlotte. A discreet financial transfer to the clinic under a charity name. Arrangements for better medication, transportation, and a room with a window view instead of the hallway wall. For the first time in years, he wasn't managing a company. He was mending something far more fragile. Later that day, he stopped by a small diner on Main Street. The place hadn't changed in 20 years. Same checkered floor, same bell above the door, same smell of bacon grease and coffee that had been sitting on the burner since sunrise. Behind the counter, a woman in her 50s looked up. Well, if it isn't Elias Hart, she said with a grin. Haven't seen you in a decade. You still take your coffee black? He blinked in surprise. Jenny? In the flesh. You look like you've been through a war and back. She poured his coffee without waiting for an answer. So, what brings the city man home? Don't tell me nostalgia. Nobody drives 6 hours for nostalgia. He hesitated. I came to see someone. Vivian Lee. The mug froze halfway in her hand. Vivian, she said softly, her tone shifting. Lord, that woman's had a rough run. Good heart, wrong luck. She leaned closer. If you're the man from her past, you've got a lot of explaining to do. Elias stared into his coffee. I plan to. Oh? Jenny studied him a moment longer, then sighed. You know, she never spoke bad about you. Not once. Even when things got hard. Just said you two belonged to different worlds. He looked up, meeting her eyes. Did she ever mention why she left? Jenny shook her head. Only that she saw something that broke her heart. Some fancy woman came through town once, years ago, sharp suit, cold eyes. Spent half an hour talking to Vivian at the diner, and the next day, Vivian packed up and vanished. Elias's stomach tightened. Do you remember her name? Jenny frowned, thinking. Rebecca, I think. Rebecca something. Wore a red coat you could spot from a mile away. She looked like trouble wrapped in money. The name hit Elias like a hammer. Rebecca Mitchell, his former investor. The one who had cut off communication right after Vivian disappeared. He pushed back his cup, his pulse quickening. Jenny, thank you. She watched him with quiet concern. Elias, whatever you're digging into, be careful. Some ghosts don't like being disturbed. He gave her a faint smile. Neither do regrets. As he stepped out of the diner, the late afternoon light had softened, turning the wet streets into rivers of gold. Somewhere in that same small town, Vivian was fighting a battle she shouldn't have had to fight alone. And now, for the first time, Elias knew there was another name, another hand behind everything they'd lost. He got into his car, his reflection flickering in the window as he whispered to himself, Rebecca Mitchell, you're going to tell me what you did. He started the engine, unaware that across town, Vivian was opening an envelope that would change everything. That same afternoon, a nurse entered room 12 holding a plain white envelope. This came for you, Miss Lee, she said, placing it on the bedside table. No return address. Vivian frowned. She hadn't received mail in months. Thank you, she murmured, waiting until the nurse left before touching it. Lila was asleep, her small chest rising and falling softly. Vivian brushed a curl from her daughter's forehead, then turned the envelope over in her hands. The paper felt thick, expensive, deliberate. She tore it open carefully. Inside was a single folded letter and a photo. The photo stopped her breath. It was her, sitting in that same diner 8 years ago, tears streaking her face as Rebecca Mitchell, the investor, leaned across the table, whispering something in her ear. On the back of the photo, in a firm, unfamiliar hand, were 5 words. She lied to you both. Vivian unfolded the letter. Vivian, you don't know me, but I know what was done to you, to both of you. The woman who came to see you that day was not acting alone. She was paid to destroy something Elias cared for more than his career. Someone wanted him alone. Ask yourself, why did those lies surface right before his company's biggest merger? Why did she disappear after you did? Don't let the truth die with pride. A friend. Her hands trembled. She read it again, slower this time, tracing every word. The hospital light flickered slightly, throwing shadows across the page. Vivian set the letter down, her mind racing through memories she had long buried the way Rebecca had spoken that day, calm but cruel, showing her forged documents and bank slips she hadn't understood. He'll never tell you, Rebecca had said back then. He's already chosen. Now, for the first time, Vivian wasn't sure what was real anymore. She stood and went to the window. Outside, the world was soft with drizzle. A man in a raincoat crossed the parking lot, helping an old woman with her groceries. It was such a small, ordinary act, yet it made her throat tighten. For years, she had built her life around bitterness and survival. Maybe she'd forgotten that kindness could still exist. Behind her, Lila stirred. Mommy? Vivian turned, her voice gentle. Yes, baby? Was Daddy a bad man? The question hit her like a gust of wind. Why would you ask that? Lila rubbed her eyes. Because you cry when you talk about him. But you don't look angry. You look sad. Vivian knelt beside the bed, pulling her daughter into her arms. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that hurt people they love, she said softly. But that doesn't always mean they're bad. It means they forgot how to listen to their hearts. Lila blinked up at her. Can we help him remember? Vivian froze, her heart aching at the simplicity of the question. Maybe, she whispered. Maybe we can. Oh? She folded the letter and slipped it into the drawer beneath her Bible. Then, with trembling fingers, she reached for her phone, one she hadn't used to call Elias in nearly a decade. Her thumb hovered over the screen before she set it down again. Not yet. Not until she knew everything. That night, as the rain turned heavier, she sat by Lila's bed and watched the window fog with her own reflection. There was a time she'd hated Elias for leaving her behind, but now she wasn't sure if he had ever truly known the truth either. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet hope began to stir, the kind that feels dangerous because it's too fragile to name. Outside, in the parking lot, the headlights of a dark sedan flashed twice before fading. A silhouette inside watched the hospital window, then made a call. "Phase 1 complete," a voice said coldly. She opened it. Vivian doesn't know it yet, but someone from Elias's past has just set a chain of truths in motion that neither of them can stop. 2 days later, the city skyline of Charlotte glimmered in the early evening light as Elias parked in front of a tall glass building. The rain had followed him all the way from the small town, clinging to his coat and pooling around his shoes. Rebecca Mitchell's office was on the 24th floor, exactly as cold and calculated as he remembered. When the receptionist asked for his name, he didn't hesitate. "Tell her Elias Hart is here," he said. The woman raised an eyebrow. "Does she know you're coming?" "She will." Moments later, Rebecca appeared at the end of the corridor, her red coat draped over her shoulders like a flag of victory. Time had barely touched her. The same perfect hair, the same controlled smile, the kind that could charm investors and break hearts in equal measure. "Elias," she said smoothly, extending her hand. "It's been too long." He didn't take it. 8 years, he replied. Long enough for the truth to rot. Her smile faltered for a heartbeat before returning. "You sound angry. That's not like you. Come in, let's talk like civilized people." Her office overlooked the city, all steel and silence. Elias stood near the window, his reflection a ghost against the skyline. "You visited Vivian Lee 8 years ago," he said quietly. "You showed her documents, accounts, photographs. You told her I was lying. Why?" Rebecca's lips curved slightly. "I protected your company, Elias. You were one mistake away from losing everything." "She was a distraction." He turned sharply. "She was my life." "That's the problem," Rebecca replied, her tone like ice. "You built something powerful, and then you let it crumble because of sentiment. Investors don't fund love stories." He stared at her, disbelief turning into fury. "So you forged evidence. You destroyed 2 lives, 3, counting a little girl who grew up without a father just to protect a merger?" Rebecca shrugged. "I did what was necessary. And look at you now, still wealthy, still standing. You should thank me." The words landed like stones. Elias stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Do you have any idea what that woman went through? She was pregnant, alone, terrified. You took her hope and twisted it into shame." Rebecca's expression flickered, but only for a moment. "You think sentiment absolves you? You would have chosen ambition anyway. You always did." He shook his head. "Not anymore." She gave a small, mocking laugh. "So what now? You're here to play the hero? To undo the past with guilt and charity funds?" Elias reached into his coat and pulled out his phone, pressing record. "I'm here for the truth, and I think you've just said enough." Her eyes widened, the first crack in her composure. "You wouldn't dare!" He stopped the recording, sliding the phone back into his pocket. "I already did. Maybe I can't fix the past, Rebecca, but I can make sure you never hurt anyone else again." Rebecca's voice hardened. "You'll regret this. I know things that could destroy you, too." Elias turned toward the door. "Then we're even." He walked out, his steps slow but certain, the kind of certainty that comes when a man decides to stop running from himself. In the elevator, he stared at his reflection once more. The man looking back wasn't the corporate titan the world admired. He was just a father, a husband who had failed, trying to earn the right to hope again. When he stepped out onto the street, the rain had stopped. The air smelled clean, almost forgiving. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to a number he hadn't dialed in years, Vivian's. His thumb hovered over the screen. Then he looked up and froze. Across the street, a black sedan idled quietly. A figure sat behind tinted glass, watching him. For a moment, he thought it was coincidence until the car pulled away slowly, disappearing into traffic. Elias stood there, rainwater dripping from his sleeve, a chill crawling down his spine. Someone else was still playing the game. As the taillights vanished, Elias realized the truth was deeper than betrayal and far from over. Back in Pine Hollow, the storm had cleared by evening. The hospital windows glowed with a soft amber light, and the air smelled faintly of wet leaves and antiseptic. Vivian sat by Lila's bed, the letter still folded in her lap. She'd read it a dozen times since it arrived, every word gnawing at her certainty. It was strange how pain could live so long inside someone, growing roots even after the memory had faded. She reached into her purse and took out the small cross pendant she hadn't worn in years. Elias had given it to her the night before he left for New York. "So you'll remember me," he'd said, tucking it into her hand. For years, she had blamed that memory for her weakness. Now, it felt like the only thing still true. The nurse, Martha, stepped in quietly. "You okay, sweetheart? You've been awfully quiet today." Vivian smiled faintly. "I'm fine. Just thinking too much." Martha nodded knowingly. "Well, that's the hardest kind of pain, the one that won't let you stop thinking." She adjusted Lila's blanket. "There's a man who called this afternoon, asked about your condition. Said his name was Mr. Hart. Should I?" Vivian froze. "You told him? Only that you were resting." He sounded worried. Vivian looked down, her heart pounding softly beneath the quiet hum of machines. So he knew. He'd found her. After Martha left, she stood by the window, staring at the dark street below. The parking lot lights shimmered in the puddles, each reflection trembling like a heartbeat. For 8 years, she had built walls around herself, high, heavy, and righteous. Now, one phone call and a single letter had cracked them open. She picked up her phone again, scrolling through old contacts. Elias Hart. The name's still there, though she'd deleted everything else. Her finger hovered over the number, but she didn't press call. Instead, she whispered to the empty room, "If you really want the truth, you'll find me." Across town, in a hotel room overlooking the same small street, Elias sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the sound of the same rain returning. He had driven back from Charlotte without rest, without music, just silence, the kind that feels like confession. The phone on the nightstand buzzed with an unknown number. He stared at it for a long moment before answering. "Mr. Hart." A man's voice, calm, businesslike. "This is Detective Granger from Pine Hollow PD. There's something you need to know. The woman you visited, Vivian Lee, she's under protective watch. Someone tried to break into her car tonight." Elias stood abruptly. "Is she hurt?" "No, sir. She's safe for now. But we found this under the driver's seat." The detective paused. Elias could hear paper rustling then. "A photo of you from about 8 years ago, standing with a woman in a red coat. Ring any bells?" His throat tightened. "Rebecca Mitchell. That's the one. Seems like whoever left it wanted her to see it." Elias's hand clenched around the phone. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. "Oh." He hung up, grabbed his keys, and headed out into the rain once more. As he drove through the slick, winding roads toward the clinic, memories collided: the smell of coffee from that diner, Lila's smile, Vivian's voice echoing in the back of his mind like a prayer he'd forgotten how to finish. At the hospital, Vivian was standing in the lobby, a coat draped over her shoulders. She looked smaller than he remembered, not weaker, just more real. For a long time, they didn't speak. The sound of the vending machine filled the silence, humming like a clock between them. Finally, Elias said, "I didn't know about any of it." Vivian met his eyes, her voice trembling. "And I didn't know how much I still wanted to believe you." He took a step closer, his tone low, almost a whisper. "Then maybe we can start by believing each other now." Outside, the rain softened to a steady rhythm, two lives finding their way back through the same storm that once tore them apart. As Elias reached for her hand, a shadow passed across the parking lot window, the same black sedan from before. Inside, a figure lit a cigarette and whispered into a phone, "They finally met." The morning after their reunion, Pine Hollow looked gentler than usual, a town washed clean by the rain. The maple trees along the main road still dripped quietly, their leaves glinting under the pale Sunday. In the diner near the hospital, Elias sat across from Vivian for the first time in 8 years. The waitress, a cheerful woman with gray curls, poured them both coffee. "Haven't seen you two together since the county fair," she said with a smile. "Guess time has a funny way of bringing people back, huh?" Vivian managed a small nod. "Yeah," she murmured. "It does." When the woman left, silence lingered between them. The smell of bacon and toast filled the air. Lila was at the clinic's playroom for the morning, giving them space neither had dared to ask for before. Elias stirred his coffee slowly. "I went to see Rebecca." Vivian looked up, startled. "Why would you do that?" "I needed answers." His voice was low, careful. She admitted what she did, the forged documents, the lies. But she wasn't working alone. Someone paid her. Vivian frowned. "Paid her? Who would—" "I don't know," he interrupted softly. "But whoever sent you that letter, they know the same truth I'm trying to find." She leaned back, her expression torn between anger and confusion. "After all these years, why now?" Elias hesitated, glancing at the people around them, two farmers laughing by the counter, a teenager sweeping crumbs from the floor. "Because someone wants to make sure the past never stays buried." Vivian reached for her cup, her hands trembling slightly. "You think we're being watched?" He met her eyes. "I know we are." For a moment, neither spoke. The diner door chimed as another customer walked in, a man in a tan coat, baseball cap pulled low. He ordered coffee and sat 2 booths behind them. Elias noticed, but said nothing. Vivian tried to steady her breath. "I don't want Lila caught in this," she whispered. "She won't be." But his voice carried a note of promise he wasn't sure he could keep. After breakfast, they stepped outside. The sun was bright but cool, the kind of morning that smelled of wet earth and second chances. Elias handed Vivian his jacket as a gust of wind passed. "You used to get cold easily," he said quietly. She smiled faintly. "You still remember that?" "I remember everything I should have held on to." They walked slowly toward the clinic parking lot. Vivian paused beside her car. "What happens now, Elias?" "We start by finding who wrote that letter," he said. "And why?" She nodded, though her expression softened with something more fragile, fear, or maybe hope. "Do you ever wonder," she said, "if forgiveness is supposed to be earned or given?" Elias looked at her for a long moment. "Maybe it's both. Maybe forgiveness is just love that refuses to die." Vivian turned away, hiding the tears that suddenly burned behind her eyes. "You always did know what to say." He smiled sadly. "Only now do I mean it." They didn't see the man from the diner cross the street behind them, slipping a folded note beneath the wiper of Elias's truck. When Elias opened it, minutes later, the handwriting was neat, deliberate, the same as the first anonymous letter Vivian had received. "You found each other. Good. But remember, truth has 2 faces. The one you lost, and the one that's still watching you." Elias looked up sharply, scanning the street. But whoever left the message was gone. He folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. The quiet town around him suddenly felt smaller, as if the walls themselves were listening. As Elias started the engine, Vivian turned in the passenger seat, and for the briefest moment, she saw a reflection in the diner window, a familiar face watching them go, smiling faintly through the glass. That afternoon, the sun slipped behind a veil of clouds, softening Pine Hollow into muted gold. Elias stood at the edge of Main Street, staring down at the note again. Truth has 2 faces. The words felt like a whisper that wouldn't fade. He decided to start with the return address printed faintly on the back of the envelope, Ashwood Print Co., a small business near the edge of town. The shop was quiet when he arrived, the faint hum of an old printer echoing in the back. A middle-aged man with ink-stained hands looked up. "Can I help you?" he asked. Elias handed him the note. "I was wondering if this came from here." The man squinted at it, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's our paper stock limited run. But the handwriting? That's not ours." He hesitated. "A woman ordered a batch of those envelopes a few months ago, paid in cash." "A woman?" Elias's voice sharpened. "Did she leave a name?" The man shook his head. "No, but she mentioned something about making peace with the past." He scratched his beard. "She had a limp, if that helps." Elias froze. A limp. For a moment, his mind flickered back to a hospital hallway, years ago, Vivian's sister, Marie, limping after a car accident, blaming him for everything that happened to Vivian. Could it be? He thanked the man and stepped outside, heart pounding. The air had turned heavy, the first signs of another storm brewing. Meanwhile, at the clinic, Vivian sat beside Lila's bed, brushing a stray curl from her daughter's forehead. Lila stirred, half asleep, murmuring, "Mommy, did Daddy really sing for you?" Vivian's hand trembled. "He used to, sweetheart. A long time ago. Can he sing again?" the girl whispered, eyes fluttering open. Vivian smiled softly, though her throat ached. "Maybe, if we're brave enough to listen." After Lila drifted back to sleep, Vivian wandered down the hallway, her footsteps echoing faintly. She passed the nurse's station and stopped. There, on the bulletin board, was a small flyer, a church charity drive for children with respiratory illness. The contact name at the bottom read Marie Lee. Her breath caught. She pulled the flyer down, reading every line again. Marie was here, in Pine Hollow. After all this time, Vivian rushed outside, dialing her sister's old number, but it went straight to voicemail. "Marie, it's me," she said, voice trembling. "Please call me back. We need to talk." Just then, headlights swept across the parking lot. Elias's truck pulled up, gravel crunching under the tires. He stepped out, holding the note. "Vivian," he said quietly, "we need to talk about Marie." She went still. "What about her? The woman who sent the letters. She might be your sister." Vivian's face drained of color. "That's impossible. Marie left after the accident. She never wanted to see me again." "She had a reason," Elias replied gently. "Back then, she thought you needed to hate me to survive. Maybe now she's trying to fix what she broke." Vivian turned away, hugging her arms. The evening light caught the tears on her cheek. "She doesn't know what forgiveness costs." Elias stepped closer. "Maybe she does. Maybe she's been paying for it all along." They stood there in the fading light, two silhouettes framed against the quiet hum of the town, the kind of stillness that holds both pain and promise. Then Elias's phone buzzed. A text message. No name attached. "Meet me behind the old church tonight. Come alone. Bring the letter. M." He showed it to Vivian. "We'll find out the truth tonight." She shook her head. "Not alone. Not this time." He looked at her, then nodded. "Then we go together." The church stood on the hill overlooking Pine Hollow, white paint peeling, its steeple half-lit by the dying Sunday. Somewhere inside, the final pieces of their broken past waited to be unearthed. As they climbed the steps of the church, a faint melody drifted through the open doors, the same lullaby Elias once sang for Vivian. And in the shadowed pews, someone was already waiting. The church stood silent at the top of the hill, its white paint fading into the mist. The bell tower no longer rang, hadn't for years yet. Somehow the air still hummed with echoes of things left unsaid. Elias parked beneath the old oak tree, headlights cutting a pale line across the worn wooden doors. Vivian hesitated beside him, fingers trembling as she reached for the handle. "I used to come here," she whispered. "After you left, I'd sit in the back pew and ask God if hate was easier than grief." Elias looked at her gently. "And what did he say?" "That hate is just grief that forgot how to love," she said, voice breaking slightly. They pushed open the heavy doors. The hinges creaked softly, the sound swallowed by the vast emptiness inside. Candles flickered along the altar, throwing gold light across the pews. And there in the first row sat a woman in a dark coat, her hair streaked with silver, one leg bent awkwardly as if favoring an old injury. Marie. She turned when she heard them. For a moment, no one spoke. Then she stood, leaning slightly on the cane in her right hand. "You came," she said. "Both of you." Vivian took a slow step forward. "You wrote those letters." Marie nodded. "Yes, I had to." "Why?" Elias asked quietly. Marie's eyes filled with tears that refused to fall. "Because I was the one who gave Rebecca your letters all those years ago. I thought I was protecting my sister. I thought you'd destroy her." Vivian froze. "You... what?" Marie's voice cracked. "After the accident, after you two fought, I blamed him, Vivi. I blamed Elias for everything. When Rebecca offered to take care of it, I didn't ask how. I just handed her your letters, your photos, everything she could use to make you walk away." Elias stared at her in disbelief. "You helped her ruin us." "I didn't know what she'd do," Marie said desperately. "I swear I didn't know she'd forge documents or send lies. By the time I realized, it was too late. You were gone, Vivian. And then I heard about the baby." Vivian's voice trembled. "You let me believe he abandoned me." "I thought it would make you strong," Marie whispered. "I was wrong. The church fell silent, except for the faint hiss of candlelight. Vivian sank onto the nearest pew, her breath uneven. "You took everything good I had left." Marie knelt beside her, her bad leg shaking. "And I've been paying for it every day since." Elias watched them, torn between fury and pity. For years, he'd pictured the villain as a stranger, in a city tower, cold, deliberate. But here it was. Guilt, human and trembling, wrapped in the voice of family. He took a deep breath. "Why now, Marie? Why come back?" Marie lifted her gaze, tears shining. "Because I saw what bitterness did to me, and I saw what it was doing to you. You both deserve the truth, even if it comes too late." Vivian's shoulders shook. "It's not just too late," she said softly. "It's cruel." Marie reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. "Then let me give you this." She placed it in Vivian's hands. Inside was a gold ring. Simple, worn, familiar. Vivian gasped. "This was Mom's." Marie nodded. "She wanted it to go to the one who could forgive first." Vivian stared at the ring for a long time, her reflection flickering in the candlelight. Forgiveness, such a small word for something that could weigh so much. Behind them, thunder rumbled softly in the distance, the sound echoing through the rafters like a sigh. As lightning flared through the stained glass, Elias saw movement in the doorway, a shadow slipping away into the rain. Someone else had been listening all along. The thunder rolled closer, shaking the old church windows. Elias turned toward the entrance, his pulse quickening. A figure stood framed by lightning, tall, still, and unmistakable. Rebecca Mitchell stepped inside. Her coat was drenched, her hair slicked to her temples. She closed the door softly behind her, her heels echoing down the aisle like slow, deliberate punctuation. "I thought I'd find you here," she said. "All of you. I may." Vivian rose to her feet, trembling. "What do you want, Rebecca?" Rebecca's eyes swept the room, landing on Marie. "I came to finish what you started years ago." Marie's jaw tightened. "I started nothing. I only tried to fix what you destroyed." Rebecca laughed, a brittle, hollow sound. "Destroyed? You think I destroyed you? You handed me everything I needed to ruin him. And I did. Because I had to." Elias took a step forward. "You had a choice." "Not back then," she snapped. "You don't know what they threatened me with. The board, the investors, they would have buried me alive if the merger failed. You think I wanted to forge those papers? I did it to survive." Her voice cracked, but her eyes stayed fierce. "And when you left, Elias, when she disappeared, I realized survival wasn't enough. You had something I couldn't buy, love, and I hated you for it." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Vivian whispered, "So you made sure no one else could have it?" "Oh." Rebecca's hand trembled. "I lost everything. My reputation, my company, my family. The only thing I had left was the truth, and I buried it until I couldn't breathe anymore." Elias looked at her, rainwater dripping from his coat. "So why now? Why come back?" Rebecca's gaze softened for the first time in years. "Because I saw the news, the little girl. Lila. You built a life around the pain I caused, and I couldn't stand it anymore. And..." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a flash drive, setting it on the nearest pew. "Everything's here. Every file, every forged document, every payment I took. You can turn it in. Clear your name. Expose me." Marie stared at her. "Why would you give him that?" Rebecca's lips trembled. "Because I'm tired of carrying the weight alone." The church fell silent again, except for the rain whispering against the stained glass. Elias looked down at the flash drive, then back at her. "If I use this, you'll lose everything. Prison. Headlines. Shame." Rebecca gave a small, broken smile. "Then maybe I'll finally be free." He stood there, torn between anger and mercy, the kind of silence that tests the measure of a man. Vivian stepped closer to him, her voice gentle. "Elias, sometimes the only way to make peace with the past is to stop fighting it." He closed his eyes. When he opened them, the rage was gone, only exhaustion and a quiet kind of grace. He picked up the flash drive and placed it back into Rebecca's hand. "Keep it. You'll know what to do." Rebecca's eyes widened. "You're letting me go?" "I'm letting myself go," he said softly. "I've lived 8 years in chains you forged, but I held the key the whole time. Tears filled her eyes. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." Elias shook his head. "Forgiveness isn't something you deserve. It's something someone gives because they can." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Rebecca turned and walked out into the rain, her figure dissolving into the night. Marie leaned against the pew, her shoulders shaking. Vivian slipped an arm around her, whispering through her tears, "It's over now." Elias stood by the altar, staring at the flickering candles. His reflection shimmered in the wax light, not the man he once was, but the man he was finally becoming. Outside, the storm began to fade. The sky opened just enough to let a pale moon through, washing the old church in silver. Elias turned to the two women who had once been his undoing, and now, perhaps, his redemption. "Let's go home," he said quietly. As they stepped out into the cool night, the church bell rang once, though no one had touched it. Somewhere, forgiveness had found its echo. The next morning, Pine Hollow woke to clear skies for the first time in a week. The storm had washed the air clean. Even the smell of the earth seemed softer, forgiving. The old church on the hill glistened in sunlight, its bell silent once more. Elias stood at the window of the small motel, watching the sun climb over the rooftops. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the weight of his watch on his wrist, or the constant ticking in his mind. Time, it seemed, had finally slowed down enough to let him breathe. Vivian knocked gently before entering. She was carrying 2 cups of coffee from the diner down the street. "They still remember your order," she said with a faint smile. "Black, no sugar," he said, taking the cup. "Some things don't change." She sat on the edge of the chair, hands folded around her mug. "Marie's at the clinic. She wanted to see Lila." Elias nodded. "How's the little one doing?" "Better. The doctor says the treatments are working." Her eyes softened. "Lila asked about you this morning," she said. "Is Daddy still sad?" He looked down, his throat tight. "What did you tell her?" "That he's learning not to be." They sat in silence. The kind that wasn't empty anymore, just full of things they didn't need to say. After a while, Elias took a deep breath. "Vivian, about last night. I didn't give Rebecca that forgiveness for her. I did it for us, for Lila. I don't want our story to end with bitterness." Vivian looked at him, the man who had once been so unreachable now, speaking with the quiet of someone finally human again. "You've changed," she said softly. "Maybe I just remembered who I was before I lost you," he replied. Later that morning, they drove to the clinic together. Marie was sitting in the courtyard, a wool blanket draped over her legs. Lila was beside her, holding a paper cup of juice and chattering about the birds in the garden. When Marie saw them, she hesitated. Guilt still shadowed her face, but Lila turned and waved. "Mommy! Daddy!" Elias knelt beside her. "Hey, sweetheart." Marie's voice trembled. "She's beautiful. She looks just like—" Vivian smiled faintly. "Like the both of us." For a long moment, none of them spoke. The sun filtered through the maple leaves, painting dappled light on their faces. Then Elias turned to Marie. "You don't have to run anymore." I'm not sure I know how to stop," she whispered. "You start by staying," he said. Marie looked down at her hands, rough, tired, but steadier than before. "I don't know if you can ever really forgive me." Vivian shook her head. "Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, Marie. It's about remembering without wanting to hate." A tear slipped down Marie's cheek. "Then maybe there's hope for me yet." Lila tugged gently on her aunt's sleeve. "Aunt Marie, can you come to the park with us later? Mommy says the ducks are back." Marie smiled through her tears. "I'd like that, sweetheart." Elias glanced at Vivian. "The park, huh? Sounds like a good place to start over." Vivian met his gaze, and for the first time in years, her smile reached her eyes. "Maybe it is." And the wind rustled the leaves, carrying the laughter of the child, the quiet of 2 sisters, and the steady heartbeat of a man learning that redemption wasn't found in grand gestures, but in mornings like this, sunlight, and second chances blending into one. As they left the clinic together, Elias felt something unfamiliar peace. But when he glanced back at the courtyard, he saw a figure in the distance, placing fresh flowers by the church gate. Rebecca, her face calm, her eyes closed, as if whispering her own prayer of release. The park lay quiet in the golden light of late afternoon. Children's laughter echoed from the playground, mingling with the soft rustle of leaves. Vivian sat on a wooden bench, watching Lila toss breadcrumbs to the ducks that paddled lazily across the pond. Marie sat beside her cane resting on the ground. The shadows of the maple trees swayed gently over them, like a rhythm of forgiveness that neither had to speak aloud. "I used to come here with Mom," Marie said softly. "We'd sit on this same bench." She said the ducks reminded her of people always circling the same pond until they were brave enough to fly. Vivian smiled faintly. "Maybe we've been circling long enough." Marie turned to her, eyes glistening. "Thank you for letting me come back, Vivi. I didn't think I'd ever be welcome again." Vivian shook her head. "Family isn't about deserving. It's about showing up even when it hurts." At the edge of the park, Elias was talking with the groundskeeper, an older man with a weathered cap. They were arranging a small memorial plaque to be placed beneath one of the trees, a quiet gesture, no ceremony, no press. The plaque simply read, "For those who seek peace, not perfection." When Elias finished, he joined the sisters on the bench. Lila ran up to him, breathless, her hair glowing in the sunlight. "Daddy, look!" she said, holding out a duck feather. "It fell right next to me." He smiled and crouched down. "Then maybe it's a sign." "Of what?" she asked. "That sometimes the things we lose still find their way back to us." Lila grinned and tucked the feather into his shirt pocket like a treasure. Vivian watched them, her hand brushing against the gold ring Marie had returned the night before. The metal was warm from the sun, and for a moment, she imagined her mother's voice whispering, "Let go, but don't forget." Marie rose slowly, wincing as she stood. "I should get going. I have a room at the church shelter for now. They're starting a volunteer program. Maybe I can help with the kids." Elias nodded. "That sounds like a good place to start over." "Oh." Marie hesitated, then looked at both of them. "You know, for all the wrong I've done, maybe this is how I make it right. One small kindness at a time." Vivian reached out and hugged her sister tightly. "That's all any of us can do." As Marie walked away, her cane tapping softly against the path, Lila called out, "Aunt Marie, don't forget the park next Sunday." Marie turned, smiling. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." The sun began to dip behind the trees, washing the park in amber. Elias sat beside Vivian again, the two of them quiet for a while. "She's strong," he said. "So are you," Vivian replied. "You just don't see it yet." He glanced at her, a small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "Maybe because I've spent years looking in the wrong direction." Vivian looked out at the pond, where Lila was laughing as the ducks trailed after her. "Do you think people can really change, Elias?" He thought for a moment. "I think they can remember who they were meant to be." She nodded, tears glimmering softly in her eyes. "Then maybe it's time we remembered together." He reached out, their hands finding each other easily, like something that had never really been lost, just waiting to be rediscovered. The church bell from the hill rang faintly in the distance, one clear note carried on the wind. The sound wasn't sad this time. It was peaceful, like a prayer that had finally been answered. As the light faded, Elias whispered to Vivian, "Tomorrow, let's take Lila to the city. Not to run, just to see where we began." Vivian smiled. "And maybe where we'll begin again." The road stretched wide beneath the morning sky, golden fields rolling out on either side. Vivian sat in the passenger seat, her window down, the cool wind catching strands of her hair. In the back, Lila was humming softly the same tune she had sung on stage months ago, though now it sounded different, calmer, whole. Elias drove in silence for a while. The sign ahead read, "Dallas, 47 miles." He glanced at Vivian. "Feels strange coming back." She smiled faintly. "Strange can be good. It means we've changed." The car filled with quiet, not heavy, not awkward, just full of meaning. Every mile felt like a page turning, closing one chapter and opening another. When they reached the city limits, the skyline shimmered in the distance. Elias pulled over by a small park near the river, the same spot where he had once watched his world fall apart. Today, the same light fell differently. They sat on a bench, Lila chasing butterflies nearby. Vivian reached for his hand. "You did it, Elias! You faced everything you ran from!" He looked at her, eyes soft. "We did it. Together." She nodded, her gaze drifting toward the water. "Do you ever wonder What would have happened if Rebecca hadn't interfered? If we'd stayed? Elias thought for a moment, then shook his head. We would have built something shallow, easy, but fragile. Now, every piece of this, he gestured around them, was broken once. That's why it's real. Vivian smiled through tears. That's what love is, isn't it? Not perfect, just proven. Across the river, church bells began to ring the same tone as Pine Hollows. Elias turned to see Lila running toward them, holding something in her small hand. Look, Mommy, a white feather. It followed us all the way here. Vivian took it carefully, her voice trembling. Maybe it's a blessing, a reminder we're being watched over. Elias brushed the feather with his thumb, then tucked it into his jacket pocket, right next to his heart. Then let's not waste it. They stood, walking toward the car as the sun rose higher, painting the city in gold. Lila skipped ahead, singing the chorus of Eternal Hearts, her clear little voice carrying across the morning air. Through storms and rain we'll find our way. Love will guide us every day. Vivian joined in, her harmony soft but steady. Elias followed, his deeper tone grounding theirs like the roots of an old oak. The three voices blended, not perfect, not practiced, but true. People on the sidewalk turned to listen, smiling at the family, singing together under the open sky. For a moment, even the city noise seemed to fade, replaced by something simple and timeless. The sound of forgiveness turned into music. When the song ended, Lila laughed. Daddy, are we home now? Elias looked around at the park, the water, the sunlight, the woman beside him, and smiled. We are now, sweetheart. We are now. Sometimes, redemption doesn't arrive in thunder or tears. It comes quietly in the sound of a child singing, in the warmth of a hand held too long, in the peace of finally forgiving yourself. Sometimes, the quietest endings hold the loudest lessons. After all the storms, the voices raised, and the tears that blurred the road ahead, what remained for Elias and his family was something simple, the sound of peace. It wasn't the grand forgiveness or the perfect reunion that healed them. It was the small, ordinary moments. A child's laughter at dawn, a cup of coffee shared without a word, the warmth of a hand that once let go and found its way back. When we grow older, we begin to understand that love doesn't always roar sometimes. It whispers through the everyday. A small kindness, a second chance, a quiet, I'm sorry, can rebuild bridges stronger than time or pride could ever tear down. In their journey, Elias, Vivian, and Lila found that redemption isn't about fixing the past, it's about choosing tenderness in the present. In the end, their story reminds us of something many of us have learned at our own dinner tables or front porches, that happiness doesn't live in wealth or success, but in forgiveness freely given and love quietly kept. Like the smell of an apple pie cooling on a kitchen windowsill, goodness travels farther than we can see it lingers, even when the day grows long. The lesson is simple but timeless. Unconditional love has the power to change fate. Everyone deserves a place to belong, a chance to be forgiven, and a hand to hold at the end of the day. Kindness, no matter how small, can turn a stranger into family. And perhaps that's the secret to peace in this noisy world, to live each day as if we're lighting a little porch lamp for someone still finding their way home. Because sometimes, that light becomes the very thing that guides us back, too. So, dear listener, take a moment tonight to think about the ones you love, the ones you may have drifted from, or those who quietly stood by you when you faltered. Maybe give them a call, or simply whisper a thank you. If this story touched your heart, press 1 the comments. If you think it could be told better, press 0 and share your thoughts. Either way, your voice matters, because stories like these belong to all of us. May peace, health, and love always find their way to your doorstep just as they did for Elias and his family.